おばあちゃんちょっと長い間いろんな人の話を聞いてる。ごめんなさい。
This is Naomi Payton, a young girl who, like many her age, dreams of standing on stage in front of a roaring crowd of adoring fans, burning a performance into their memories so bright that it will be immortalized forever, not just with them, but with yourself as well. However, reality is not a dream, and being a mixed-race aspiring performer in the Japanese entertainment industry, rather, the road she was staring down was more akin to that of a nightmare, where even if she were to get a breakthrough, the life of a small rookie idol is not exactly known to be a glamorous one. So, why did she and so many other girls like her even attempt to walk this thorny path of pain and uncertainty in the first place? Well, as a child too young to even go to elementary school yet, Pei did what any kid growing up in the mid-2000s does. Turn on the TV. Airing at the time was a popular kids anime called Peiko, and Pei would watch it religiously. The show itself was a sort of magical girl-esque theme following two young heroines doing battle against evildoers in the typical Monster of the Week format. So nothing to do with idols. And now you're probably wondering, in that case, how did this inspire Pei? Well, that will come in a moment, but because she had enthusiastically watched these episodes over and over, kind of like a crippling drug addict going for their fix, it got to the point where she started muting the volume, turning on the subtitles, and proudly acting out the lines herself in sync with the episode, pretending she was one of the characters and fully immersing herself in the world of the show. While it's funny and even kind of adorable to imagine a kid doing this, by doing that she came to subconsciously realize that the characters in these shows are voiced by actual humans. This led to a kindling desire within her to voice one of these characters herself, and in her naive childish mind, that meant getting to enter the world of the show and become part of Peiko. Now, fast forward to elementary school, and Pei had finally branched out from mainly watching Peiko. While flicking through the channels, something else had caught her eye. Something that really appealed to her love of cute, girly, frilly aesthetics. A live performance from the famed girl idol group AKB48. At the time, they're in the peak of their popularity, having just released a very successful album of all their greatest hits, and many just as adored singles that even charted in the top 10 of Japanese music rankings pretty frequently. There was not a single day in this period that passed by where Pei didn't watch the televised performances of this enthralling group. The huge arenas lit up by thousands of little lights spanning an array of colors, the expressive upbeat pop music that was surprisingly really catchy, and the huge variety of outfits with cute charms that were matched only by the members that were wearing them. Pei fell in love with it all, and it was here that her dream of being a pop idol had spawned. But like a lot of kids, Pei didn't really just have one dream. As you saw earlier, she liked multiple things. At this time, she was even taking ballet, probably inspired by the dancing that she saw in those live performances. So she didn't know yet what she liked best, and thus what she should pursue. She did, however, vaguely know of the concept of talent agencies, and so with that innocent child naivety, she thought maybe if she joined one, she would get to do some gigs and maybe find out what she truly loved the most. So, what does any child do when they aren't really sure of how they should proceed? Of course, Pei went to her mother and asked her what she thought of the conundrum. Now, from anime and what you hear in stereotypes, you think of Asian parents as being extremely strict, where fun is the devil and completely useless. All that matters in life is studying, performing in tests, getting good grades, graduating from university, and joining the workforce as yet another salaryman drone, or salarywoman in this case, where you work extreme and unreasonable hours, drink in your spare time to cope with your shitty life, and then probably kill yourself, becoming yet another addition to the alarmingly large statistic that is the suicide rates in Japan. So, surprisingly, in contrast to that, Pei's mom was as enthusiastic as Pei was about her dreams and her desire to find out what she wanted to pursue in the entertainment industry. So, she told Pei that since they lived somewhat close to Tokyo, once she was a little older and in junior high school, she should try as many different talent agency auditions as she can, can. Really have fun with it and see what she likes. So that is what Pei did. As soon as she got into junior high school, she looked into all sorts of different websites and magazines, searching for any talent agency audition that she could find. During this exploration, in the summer of her first year as a junior high school student, she stumbled across an audition for a small little talent agency called Sony Music Artists. That's right, Sony, the same huge corporation that makes TVs, PlayStations, microphones, you name it. Oh yeah, they also just happen to be one of the largest music labels in the world, and this audition was for none other than to be a singer for one of the biggest titans in the industry. Remember, Pei wasn't entirely sure if singing was the thing that she loved the most. In fact, she wasn't even really very confident in her abilities as a singer. However, she did have a longing to be on stage as a pop idol, just like the groups that she completely adored and watched every day. Becoming an official singer seemed like a good step towards that path. So, figuring she had nothing to lose, Pei applied for the audition. Now, we don't know exactly the process of the audition, however, from my research, it seems that it likely would have followed this structure. First, Pei would go to what is known as the initial audition. There, she would enter a room with all the other applicants, waiting for her turn to be called up. When it was finally her turn, she would get to perform a song of her choice in front of a small panel of judges. These judges would usually consist of some mix of vocal coaches from the agencies, producers, and some sort of agency representative. They would assess your voice, your range, tone, and general potential for growth. To Pei's surprise, she actually passed this initial audition, making it to the next stage of the process known as the callback. In this, she'd most likely be assigned a specific song and maybe even a dance routine from the agency, having to then learn and perform it in front of another panel of judges in order to demonstrate her ability to do similar duties to that which she would have to do as a member of their agency. It's also likely after that performance she'd have to do a short interview with them to let them gauge her personality and see if she's someone that would do well in this line of work. Once again, against the odds, Pei managed to pass the second stage and move on to the last boss of this process, the final audition. Here, the select few candidates who managed to make it this far would do their most challenging performance yet. This performance often isn't even just singing and dancing. It's not unlikely they even make you do some acting to see your versatility and assess your capabilities of doing multiple roles in the entertainment industry. Not only that, but this time there would be significantly more judges and they would consist of bigwigs from the agency. After that performance, assuming you survived, they'd do a more detailed interview with you and really try to hone in on the candidate's motivation and their potential. After that, you are left with literally no indication of how it went. You simply have to just get on with your life and await a call that may never come. Days would go by, weeks even, but finally, the call would come.
もしもし
That's right, Pei had officially passed the audition and should now officially be a singer under the Sonic Music label and all her dreams would come true. Right? No, of course not. Of course it would not be that easy. Rather, Pei was about to learn that reality is not a fairy tale. Only the most talented of talented people get to make that direct leap into a debut with the agency. Pei, being 12 years old, was not only extremely young, but to that point didn't even have any formal singing training. What they saw in her was not a glistening gem ready to be shown off to the world, but rather a potential diamond in the rough that, given some refinement and polishing, may be able to flourish into something beautiful. So, what they were offering her was not an official debut, but instead an invitation to take part in an intensive training process in which she would work with vocal coaches, acting coaches, maybe even dancing coaches, everything she would need in order to dig out any potential lying dormant within her. This would be brutal, and there would even be regular assessments and internal showcases to test her progress, making sure that taking her on was not a mistake and that she was worth keeping on the program. There, There isn't really a set time for the duration of the training. It basically continues until you either evolve and manage to land your first major role in the entertainment industry,
or you fail to meet expectations and they just give up on you, or even worse, you give up on yourself.
Some people manage to debut within a year,
some never at all, instead having to accept reality and go into further education or the workforce. So, as suggested,
while in training, Pei was applying for auditions for all sorts of roles: singing, commercials, acting, modeling, you name it. But as you can imagine, landing that first major role is not at all easy. The process of going to audition after audition and being met with nothing but rejection is completely soul-crushing, even for the most optimistic of aspiring talent. But for Pei, she didn't even have the luxury of this problem, for her problem was somehow even worse than that. You see, Pei is what they call a hafu in Japan. This means being half Japanese genetically. Pei was born to a Japanese mother and an American father. When you apply for these auditions, just like when you apply for a job, you have to send in your personal information. So, when the people running these auditions looked at Pei's information, they saw that she was a hafu and then just straight up rejected her before she even got a chance to audition. They didn't care what she looked like, they didn't care how good she was at Japanese, they did not even care that she was born and raised in Japan. Simply being half American was her sin, and just like the devil, they intended to punish her for it. So, desperately trying to escape this judgment, she would apply for acting roles for characters that are foreign, and depressingly, that worked. Kind of. You see, while Pei had an American father, the only English she would ever get to speak was with him on occasion. Everywhere else in her life, she was using Japanese. This resulted in her English being okay-ish for someone who doesn't really use it.
Is it liquid?
But for a role where you are expected to speak the language on a near native level, it was nowhere near good enough. So, while now she would at least be allowed to audition, she was completely doomed to fail any audition for a foreign role she attended due to not having good enough English. This vicious cycle of being gatekept from Japanese roles by basically straight up racism and not having the capability to get foreign roles continued well into the second year of Pei's training. With each rejection, the grim reality of her hopeless,
wretched situation was settling in more and more, heavily affecting the mental state of the once bright young girl who dreamed of being just like her idols. It was at the pit of this shroudy abyss of uncertainty that she found a small
glimmer of hope. In her second year of junior high school, by some miracle, Pei managed to get an audition, and not only that, she even passed it. The role was for a small idol group called Idol Ing, that was the spiritual successor of the once popular Idoling. Confusing naming convention, I know. The concept of the original group was to be a sort of reality TV show, kind of. Fuji TV would take in rookies and train them to be idols, where then they would perform live, do various activities, challenges on stream, meet fans, all the typical idol stuff. The concept of the successor Pei joined was a similar sort of deal. The group would be trained and then do idol activities. Sounds great, right? I mean, this is just what Pei dreamed of. Well, not exactly. You see, while the original group and show were fairly popular, this new successor group was much more modest in its achievements. I can't tell you exactly how less popular it was, as it was so much so that if you search for the group, all you'll find is the original. Any whispers of Idol Ing is very few and not really at all informative. But I think the biggest indicator of the relative flop of this successor is the fact that the original Idoling ran for 9 years, while Pei's Idol Ing lasted for only 2, and it barely made it to 2 years. As after the first year, that live broadcast program that the group was for was cancelled. Something I presume wouldn't have happened if it was really popular and doing really well. This means
a big chunk of the group's activities were now cut away, and as such, being a member of this group was not really something that would be financially viable in the long term.
nor was it even really guaranteed that this group would continue to exist in the long term. So, naturally, members began to look for future work, and after a while, some of them managed to secure a new role. Thus, they could no longer commit to the group, and honestly, it seemed like the company running the group were looking to close the doors anyway. So, while it wasn't officially announced that the group was ending until October, the members probably knew way before that, and the writing had been on the wall for quite some time. The problem for Pei is, while she almost certainly knew this was coming, unlike the others, she isn't able to just easily land a new role due to being a Hafu. And so she was probably feeling a lot of anxiety at the time about her future. It was in this period of time that Pei and Idol Ing would get an invitation to an event called Tokyo Idol Festival. It's an event where various idol groups performed, did fun challenges, and spoke about their activities in the industry. Here is where Pei let slip a window of insight into her thoughts and feelings surrounding what was going on and her prospects of ever fully breaking into the entertainment industry.
いろんな人の話を聞いてる
ごめんなさい。なんか
どうしたのペイちゃんなんか学校で会ったのあったよそうだよねここスナックだからね
なんかアイドルになりたかったんですけど、周りの子からなんかハーフは無理だみたいなこと言われて、
そんなこと
なんかそんなことないでも全然いらっしゃるじゃないですか、だから絶対なれると思ってたんですけど、なんかなれないとか言われた時期がすごく辛くて。
From the fact Pei was overwhelmed by emotion on stream in public, it's very clear
that this comment of her dreams being impossible due to being mixed race, whether it was intended to be malicious or not, all the same,
it got to her. And of course it would, as to her, the words weren't just frivolous. How many auditions had she not been allowed to go to at this point? The first and potentially only real chance she was ever going to get was dying soon, with having achieved nothing really of note. She was going to be in her third year of training soon. It was likely she had even seen fellow trainees find success and go on to make their debut. When will it be her turn? Will her turn ever even come?
maybe it would just be best to give up on this silly fantasy and focus on school. She was about to be a high school student. These are very important years for her, and she can't afford to keep messing around
on something that's going nowhere.
絶対アイドルになってやるって。
But you see, that is not the cloth from which Pei is cut.
Her situation and what was said to her was upsetting, to be sure.
But giving up is just simply not in her nature. Instead, now, fueled with the spite of those who would deny her, she resolved herself to stay the course and find a way out of this shroudy abyss. Staying the course, however, did not just mean belligerently bashing her head into the wall and hoping it breaks. If you remember, being an idol was not Pei's only dream, nor even the one she was even sure she wanted the most. It just so happened to be the one that she got her first real break in. Her original dream, all the way back before elementary school, was to be a voice actor. So, it was in this time period that she expressed to her agency that she would like to give voice acting a shot. Of course, they didn't have an issue with this. After all, she is a trainee and the goal is to get into the entertainment industry. What your path is to get there is down to you and fate. So, she began applying for voice acting auditions. Straight away, she noticed a huge change in her experience with voice acting auditions
in comparison to the auditions that she was trying to get before.
That being that she was actually allowed to audition. They didn't gatekeep her from it simply because she was half American. Rather, she could go to the audition and her own efforts and skill were the determining factors of whether or not she got the role. Even though she hadn't secured any roles yet, at this time she thought, and I quote, What a wonderful industry this is. It's crazy that the bar for a wonderful industry is just simply not being racist, but hey, such is the world we live in sometimes. Nonetheless, through getting to actually go to auditions, accumulating experience, and further honing her craft, eventually, Pei's persistence bore fruit and she landed her first official voice acting role. Now, it wasn't a major role, she was just playing a character in some small mobile game called Baton Equals Relay. In fact, the game itself was so small it only died in 4 months after it launched, so it wouldn't qualify as something big enough for her to end her training period. While sure, you could look at that pretty negatively, it is another project
dying pretty quickly after her involvement. Maybe Pei is just the harbinger of doom, cursed to destroy anything that she joined.
But actually, she felt relatively positive about the whole thing. After all, she had managed to make progress in the world of voice acting much quicker than she had in anything else that she had tried to this point. She wasn't at all pleased with her performance in the role, though really feeling her inexperience and lack of fundamental technique in all the recording sessions. But despite that, the production was pleased with her efforts and it was a great opportunity to learn, as that hunger to level up and prove the people who disparaged her wrong was driving Pei forward. You see, there's a lot of dead time in voice acting when you're waiting for your turn or waiting to hear feedback. The natural thing for anyone to do in this time is just to browse Twitter, listen to some music, maybe even a cheeky little YouTube video from this amazing up-and-coming content creator. But Pei did not want to waste any opportunities. She went so far as to make it a point to leave her phone at home when she goes to the recording studio. So, not only was she getting in reps in the studio and correcting her mistakes, but also during the downtime, she was intensely focused on observing other, more experienced voice actors whenever possible, making a note of their technique and stealing anything that she could to accelerate her own growth. So, while of course she wasn't where she wanted to be right now, through taking every chance she could to learn and really giving her all to her lessons in voice acting, singing, physical acting, doing everything she could to be better than she was the day before, over the course of the next 3 years, it was all accumulating and she was rapidly enhancing her abilities. When you're doing all you can like this, opportunity is inevitable. And for Pei, because she was refining her skills, and that was no doubt being showcased in those internal assessments by her agency running this training program, the staff at her agency took notice of her advancement. Now, in the world of voice acting, and I'm sure even in other areas of the entertainment industry, not all roles are given via audition or even invitation. In Japan especially, productions come to form relationships with certain agencies that they've had a good experience with in the past. If these agencies keep sending you talent that do well in the roles that you need, then of course you're going to start trusting them and their talent program. So it's not uncommon for a production to approach an agency they have a good rapport with and say, hey, I'm making this thing, I have this role, here's what I'm looking for, tell me who you think would be a good fit. In this case, the production in question was Sunrise, and they were looking for a rookie voice actor with potential for an upcoming project that they were making. They had a good relationship with Sony from past experience getting talent from them before, and so they approached them once again. They were like, hey, you know the vibe, you got any promising rookies you think would be a good fit? To which Sony were like, you know what? We actually do have someone who's been getting better and better every day. They're showing a lot of promise. And so, in her 3rd year of high school, not long before she would have had to decide between focusing on further education or joining the workforce, Naomi Payton would be offered her first major voice acting role. As you guys probably know, that role was for a character in the next iteration of the famed Love Live franchise. Landing this major role would also end Pei's status as a trainee, now becoming an official member of the Sony Music Artists. Of course, Pei was beyond elated at this news and accepted the challenge, and be under no illusion, this role was indeed a challenge. Not only would she have to deliver a performance worthy of being in an iconic, major anime franchise for her anime voice acting debut, no less, but also with being at Love Live comes with it additional responsibilities that a typical voice actor doesn't have to deal with. Love Live is a music anime franchise, and a major aspect of it is the live events that the brand puts on to both promote itself and give content to the fans. These aren't small-time shows either. They frequently sell out huge venues and arenas in Japan to over tens of thousands of die-hard simps. This is way beyond the scope of
anything Pei had done before, and so
of course it was daunting. But to Pei, who had always dreamed of being on big stages, just like the groups that she had watched as a child, it was also really exciting. So she gave everything she had and more to her training. In the end,
Pei didn't get to join Precure,
but she did manage to voice in one of the biggest ongoing anime franchises. And that initial anime season was even arguably the most successful initial season the franchise had done so far.
She did also get to more than fulfill her other dream
of being a pop idol, even performing in Tokyo Dome, the third biggest arena in all of Japan,
while those who talked down to her because of her race
could do nothing but look on as maybe one of those 55,000 fans seated in the arena, all screaming her name. So, the lesson here from Pei's story is one of resilience. Pei is not superhuman, nor even gifted. In fact, she was dealt a severe handicap in life for the path that she wanted to walk.
Almost fatal even. She failed, felt depressed, questioned if she even had it in her to do it, got told by those around her that she definitely would never be able to do it. It would have been so easy to just fold and take the easy way out. The excuse is literally right there built in for her. Oh, there was nothing I could do. I was just born half American. It is what it is.
But rather than be a quitter, she chose to fight her hardest and see if she could forge a path for herself where there was one not given. Then, at the end of it all, when she truly knew inside that she did all she could find closure in that and move on with peace at mind. But when you truly give your everything like she did, and you know in your heart of hearts that that is what you did, then, just like Pei, you'll be surprised at what you can achieve. And so don't give in to life's bullshit. Be resilient.